Hello, Sales Nation. I am your host, as always, every single day I say this. I'm your host, Will Barron, and welcome to another episode of the Salesman Podcast. 100%, it's happening. Thank you for chasing me. Thank you for the encouragement, but we're now a daily show. We will be doing a podcast Monday to Friday, the usual interviews. We've got some bigger guest lines up. It's exciting. I'm excited as I sit here and pitch this to you. Saturday is going to be the Ask Will show. We did an experiment on YouTube probably about 6 months or so ago now. That worked really well. So that's a Q&A format. You guys send in your questions with hashtag AskWillShow on Instagram, Twitter. We'll then pick them up and I'll answer them. So any questions about sales, business, quite a few questions just about life and lifestyle and things like that in general as well we cover. So that will be coming every Saturday. Every Sunday, we'll be doing a series of videos and a series of audio content that will come up if you're listening to this on your iPhone or your Android phone and you're listening to the audio only feed. It'll make more sense on Sunday when you hear the first episode of that. But yeah, 7 days a week, you'll be getting audio and video content from us at salesman.red and the Salesman Podcast. So I'm really excited just to share that with you because that's a big step for us in what we're pushing out and the download numbers that we're going to be getting from all this, which is, a key metric for us. And if you guys don't listen, I've said this countless times, if you guys don't listen and tune in, we don't have a show. So thank you for downloading this episode and I appreciate it. With that all said, today's episode, we're talking about content, social selling. We're taking it on a slightly less practical angle and looking at why we should be social selling and selling through content. And we've got one of the world's leading experts on all of this, Julio Viskovich. You can find out more about Julio over at his LinkedIn profile, at Julio Visco on Twitter, julioviskovich.com. He's got a book out called Sell Marketing. Everything that we talk about is available in the show notes over at salesman.red/109. And with that, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, Julio, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Hey, Will, thank you for having me, man. It's a true pleasure.
You're more than welcome. Okay, so today we're going to talk about revenue, social media, social selling, and I think this is going to be an interesting slant on the conversation rather than how to use Twitter. And we've had those conversations plenty of times, so your insights on this are going to be invaluable, I'm sure. So, massively loaded question to get started. So, you were a sales trainer in 2008. You've been around the game for a long time from that date. How has social selling really ingrained itself into the world of sales? Is it something that top performers have to use? There's unequivocally no doubt about it. Should every salesperson, in the B2B world specifically, I guess, should they be using social selling to really clean up and smash their sales targets in 2016?
They absolutely have to, Will. They absolutely have to. If you think about how things have changed, and I mean, it's no secret. If I asked you, where do you do your research on buying anything, you're probably going to tell me you either jump to the internet or you take out your mobile device and have a look, whether that's B2C or B2B. So if we stay on the B2B realm, we think about buyers, researching, not only using social media and asking people for advice, feedback, etc., but just simply Googling things. And social has so many elements that need to be in the sales process today, from social listening to understanding, what are your competitors doing, who's asking questions about your brand, your products, your line of business, etc. But also going out there, sharing content, engaging. So if I say, why is it that way today? It's because the buyer has changed completely. They're doing research online, they're digitally connected, they're a 2.0 buyer. And as a seller, if we don't give them what they need in terms of a channel of communication, we're going to lose. And if I think of what's a great analogy of the sales process today, it's a tripod. To be successful, a salesperson has to use email, they have to use phone, and they have to use social media. Each one of those three has a huge place in today's sales process. And if you're missing out on one, you're trying to stand up a tripod with two legs, and sometimes even worse, even one leg, and that's going to be trouble.
Okay, so I was going to ask you then, and that's a great analogy of the three things together, because I believe that as well. But is there any data or anything other than I do this and John does this and Bob does that, that suggests that social selling is more or less effective than phone or email? Or did you just answer the question in that you need all of them? That's the answer.
And that's the answer. And that's the answer for sure. You need all three of those to execute a proper sales process in 2016. Any one of those that's missing, you're in big trouble. And if you think of some of the statistics that have been put out, whether it's by Aberdeen Group or IDC or whoever that is, Serious Decisions, everything leads to salespeople who are adopting social selling and doing it right, at least, are hitting their quotas. And if it's buyer statistics as well, we're seeing that buyers are consistently coming to the salesperson with the first touch of having, somewhere between 60 and 90% of the sales process already done through digital research. So on both ends and both fronts, the data is telling us you have to be on social and doing it properly.
Okay, so I'm intrigued here to get your insights because I don't know the answer to this question, but if the buyer's already done that first bit of research, that first touch, and it probably, for most people, even though they don't want to admit it, for most salespeople who believe they can do anything, it's very difficult for an individual salesperson, unless you want to become that huge industry expert, to be that first touch, to be, for your website or blog, to be where the research is done. So that's beyond the reach, practically, of most salespeople. It's not beyond the reach of a company in the marketing department that the salesperson is working for to build all that in. But assuming the salesperson doesn't have that backup, what should they be doing? So, and where I'm getting at is, if the prospect has already done that research, that's kind of gone, that's in the past. Does social selling still really matter for that salesperson? Because they're going to get an email in, they're going to get a phone in. Could they not just use those two parts of the tripod and still do a pretty good job?
I love that question, by the way. And I'm going to kind of answer it in two different ways. First of all, if they're coming to you with 90% of the sales process already done, good for you, because they probably should be going to somebody else. And why is it's just sharing content. It's getting stuff out there in front of your potential prospects. And when I say that, it's, knowing your buyers. Where are they online? Is it Twitter? Is it LinkedIn? Is it anywhere else, right? What LinkedIn groups are they using? What Twitter hashtags are they using? And by pushing content to those hashtags, to those LinkedIn groups, or wherever your buyer personas might be, you are affecting the sales process. Somebody's going to see your messaging and ultimately lead them to do more research and then reach out to you. So in that case, you may not even know someone, but you're still affecting the research process and the early part of the sales process. Now, let's say that you haven't been doing that, or you're just getting started today. To answer the second part of your question, I think that there's massive amounts that you can do when it's time to have that phone call, when it's time to have that first email, right? So, for example, there's a great sort of analogy, or maybe even proof point that Vorsight uses, and they call it the 3x3. And what the 3x3 is it says, before you have a call or an email, you should take under 3 minutes and find 3 pieces of contextual information about that individual. So if I was going to have that first call, cold call, or email, before I ever do that, what I have to do is head over to LinkedIn, at least, maybe even Twitter or any of the other social networks, and just spend a small amount of time finding 3 pieces of rapport that you can use to accelerate, whether that's the same school that you went to, whether it's an interest that you share, whether it's a group that you volunteer, whether it's a mutual contact or connection that you have. All of that can be found on LinkedIn very, very easily and very, very quickly. And if you use that, all of a sudden you've accelerated the relationship. You've built that rapport quickly, where somebody else might take 5-10 minutes or never do it because they don't know what the other person is interested in. So those are 2 ways, I think, to not only affect the process at the beginning, but if you haven't done that, how you can use social to contribute to the sales process.
Okay, and I'm kind of led you down this direction, so I'm glad you went down there then, because I'm really intrigued of, should social selling be split into 2 separate, even just name 2 different things of lead gen? I don't know what, you probably come up with some better names than what I can come off the top of my head, but there seems that social can be used for lead gen, which is sharing content and that kind of thing, which is one conversation. But then researching over social is a total no-brainer. Every salesperson should be doing that, even if you're not social selling and you're not intrigued and you're not interested in going down that route at all. You're you're a fool, you're an idiot if you're not going on LinkedIn and researching prospects on there, because it's to a great extent it's free, it's easy, and as you said, it could take 2 or 3 minutes and it's done. So from that, then, are we talking about two separate things here, or is it okay to wrap it up into one ball?
I think you're right. I think it is great to think about it in multiple subsets, maybe even more than two or three. When I think about it, what I'm doing is looking at the sales process. So, how is your sales process built out today, and what parts are in it? And each and every one of those parts has the ability for social to influence it. So, what I mean is, if you have a lead development team, right, they should be focused on a certain subset of those skills, right? So if I think of lead gen, those folks should definitely be listening all day long on Twitter, on LinkedIn, following competitors, creating Twitter lists, figuring out who's talking about them, who's asking questions about a potential demo online, those great things. Whereas if it's a salesperson or account executive who's focused on getting somebody from the lead team and then driving that home and having a great conversation, it's a completely different ballgame. It then becomes, okay, less broad listening and more focused, targeted research on a specific individual. Who else is in the buying committee? Who else can influence that decision? And then really becoming much more targeted within the account. So I think there's completely two different skill sets. And what my hope is, Will, and I think you feel the same. At least what I get from you is that hopefully social just gets removed from the equation and it just is added into the whole process. We don't have to say social selling. Let's give it 2 or 3 years and let's hope that happens.
I hate that phrase. I literally only include that phrase. This will resonate with you, but perhaps not half the audience. But for SEO purposes, that's the only reason we use it on the blog, because people are searching for it. So things are entitled that way, so we show up in search. Otherwise, yeah, I hate it. It's just selling. And I was not in sales when email first took off, so I don't know if there was the same hoo-ha with email selling. I've just no idea. But the way you described it then, of social influences the steps of the sales process, I think that's exactly right. And yeah, your expertise on this obviously surpasses mine. So when you say that, I take it on board. And yeah, if these are just two skill sets that we've talked about in the first 10 minutes of conversation, I'm sure there's more, and I'm sure it's going to develop to be more over the time. What I'm intrigued to now, and I'm glad that we got to this point, because this is where I wanted to get to with the context that we just built. For the salesperson listening to this, it could probably get overwhelming, especially if they're not on tools such as rFactor, such as Nimble, .com. I'm sure if you tried to do this all yourself and you're using native browsers for Twitter, for Facebook, for LinkedIn, it becomes, I just couldn't keep track of it. I have to use tools such as Nimble to keep on top of everything that we do. How do you know, and this is the $50 million question, this is going to be the basis for what we're going to talk about now, and hopefully the answer is you don't, because that's going to ruin the rest of the rest of your interview is going to be 4 minutes long otherwise. Julio, how do you know when something you're doing in social is actually adding revenue to your bottom line as a salesperson? How do you track that you shared a piece of content and then that person reappears 6 months later and they want to buy from you? Is there a way to track all that? And honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. And so what are your thoughts on that?
That's the holy grail question that everybody's asking today in the marketplace. I get the same one each and every time. And this is definitely not a sales pitch by any means, but that's what we're doing at rFactor. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide an environment where marketing can put a piece of content in. That content goes out to the appropriate salespeople. When they share it out, everything is tracked and tagged so that if somebody clicks on that link that you shared, then they ultimately have a little flag that they carry with them when they go over to your website, your landing page, etc., and fill in that information. Then you essentially have tagged that individual as coming from your message. Now it's key to make sure that in your CRM system, whatever one you're using, that lead source is attributed to social. So whether it's that way, a lot of people are doing it manually. If they have an engagement on LinkedIn or Twitter, what they're doing is then going into CRM, putting that in. And that's something, again, that we're trying to bridge at rFactor, is making sure that anytime somebody engages with you, you can add them directly from our platform to the CRM system and have that tracked as a lead source back to social. So at the end of the day, sales leadership can look at that and they can say, wow, we just put in 25 leads this month as a result of social. Look at our pipeline as a result of social. So it's making sure that there's a bridge between your activities and to your standard CRM reporting. And I think making sure that you have that bridge is going to tell you and the sales leaders at your organization how well social is performing. Is it worth it? Is it influencing any of the buyers at all? So I think that's a first step, is at least logging things and understanding if there's even any impact at all. And I suspect you will see a ton of impact, but hey, I can't speak for everybody.
Awesome. And that's what I'm intrigued about, because I get a lot of emails. So I get between 50 and 100 emails a day from listeners and fans, and I appreciate everyone who's sending emails in, but I commonly get the same emails. One of which is, my sales manager is an arsehole. He will not listen to me. I've tried social selling. I can prove that it works. Yada, yada, yada. So then my immediate response is, well, they're a sales manager for a reason. Generally they've been promoted to that position. What evidence do you really have that what you're doing is more effective than the 20 phone calls they're asking you to make every day? And the response is, well, I spoke to this one dude, and then a month later I closed a deal with someone at his company, and it's all a bit wishy-washy. So you said the Holy Grail then. Is this something that obviously R Factor are working on, which is interesting? Is this something that a salesperson needs to implement? Can an individual do this? Or is this something that a whole company, team, marketing, sales, and leadership need to be on board with to actually track revenues with social selling?
So I think what an individual salesperson can do just to get the ball rolling is, it may be a little bit manual, but there's a few kind of levers that you can kind of look at and point to, that's going to drive it home with sales managers or leadership. They're concerned about only very, very few things. And, it's generally revenue, what's coming in the door, how quick is the sales cycle moving, etc. So as a salesperson, you need to be able to provide a business case to be able to push that forward. And the business cases that I've seen work has been to sit down and look at some of the accounts that you've been working on, and maybe do a couple with social selling and some without. And at the end of the day, looking back at it to see, how quick was the sales cycle with social involved versus how quick was it without social involved. And what you're going to see, and I hope, and if you're doing it right, you're going to see much more accelerated results with social, because now all of a sudden those dark periods that existed within a traditional sales process between email, phone are now removed, and you're micro touching your buyers and prospects on a regular basis each and every day. So you're going to see acceleration, whether it's moving it out to a closed lost or hopefully moving it into a closed one. Regardless, you're going to see accelerated results. So I think that, and then just making sure that you do capture where your attribution of leads is coming from. And if it is coming from LinkedIn or wherever, and your sales managers or leadership have not put that into the CRM as a lead source yet, then you have to do that on your own manually, track it in a spreadsheet or a document or whatever that is. And when you see success, present it to leadership. And that's how I've seen things kind of bubble up from the ground level.
Final one on this before we run through some questions that we ask everyone that comes on the show. Should salespeople, so your position is VP of Marketing, is that right?
It is,
so
yes.
You're gonna have a different insight on this than what the VP of Sales and that comes on the show, what they suggest. But should salespeople be creating content or purely sharing other people's content and curating it?
See, that's a question again, and I love to answer it, because a lot of people today are curating their own content. They're sharing it out. And what I find is that's a disaster, unless you're kind of like the top kind of 5%, right? That really knows what they're doing. For me, how I kind of came to be is I had a marketing and a sales background. So I had both of those things working together. So I inherently knew each piece of content that I was curating and sharing out had to be in line with my company's overall strategy. It had to not talk about competitors. And it had to follow a number of guidelines that, fit. Like, if I'm going to share it to this individual, what part of the sales process are they in? And which piece of content do I need to share to push them over the status quo, and keep them, moving along with us down the funnel. Now, most salespeople don't think that way. So what I would say is marketing really should be involved for a little bit of help there, and they need to really be able to provide the content that is in line with strategy. Because let's face it, salespeople need to focus their time on high value selling activities. And curating content is not a high value selling activity. Getting them on the phone and pushing them along is an extremely high value selling activity. So if they can get a little bit of help, have the content there, have it tagged, where to share it to what LinkedIn group or hashtag, what part of the sales process it's for, so that if it's late stage funnel, like it might be social proof or a case study, then that should be tagged. So if you have somebody that's moving down the funnel, share that case study to them, share it to them via direct message on LinkedIn or tag them on Twitter. And if salespeople do think that way, then I would say, hey, go ahead. But right now, I think keep that aside and let somebody who is in charge of driving that home across the entire gamut of folks, different lines of businesses, different geographies, whatever that looks like for your company, and take that out of the salesperson's hands and just let them do what they're meant to do and what they're good at doing.
Brilliant. So I've never worked at a company, and I've worked at multi-billion-dollar medical device companies. I've consulted for them that I've worked for in the past as well. I've gone back to consult. And I've never, as a salesperson, I've never used any marketing material that was more effective or more useful than me, putting it on the table and not even really talking about it. And it's just being a prop more than anything else. So this isn't indicative of every industry. Obviously, if you've got a SaaS product, for example, it's probably marketing that's brought the lead to you rather than medical devices. You go out and you close the deals yourself from the perspective. So I'm slightly biased to my thoughts on this, but should sales and marketing teams, should it just be one team? Because then within sales, obviously you've got, or within marketing, either or, I guess, you've got lead demand, lead gen, you've got the closers, you've got the appointment setters. Should this all be under one roof in a modern sales-led company in 2016?
See, that's an amazing question. And a little while ago, the one book that I've authored in my lifetime was called Sell Marketing. And that's exactly what I was getting at, is how can we blend sales and marketing? We have to come up with a word for it. Didn't exactly, stick and go viral or anything like that. But at the same time, it's the concept that matters and counts, right? And I do agree that there has to be some bridge. There has to be silos that are removed. The best companies that have done this and executed it the best have done, let's say at the very small level, at least started by department exchanges and having people in sales actually sit in marketing for one day a month, or vice versa, and start to have a little bit more of a blended atmosphere and start to understand each other, because right now they don't. And how can we bridge that even further? I would say, yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily one department. Although I think it's heading to that. Give it to 2018, and I think there's going to be something just called customer experience, and that's going to, round out sales, marketing, customer support, HR, and anybody else who's customer facing. But today, the best we can do is basically start to look at a team called perhaps a center of excellence, is a term that gets thrown around. And we have members in that team that are in charge of meeting once per week or biweekly or monthly to make sure everything's moving in the right direction. Sales is getting the right content, what content is effective, etc. Putting somebody from demand gen in there, somebody from sales, somebody from marketing, someone from the blogging team, just to meet once bi-weekly is going to be a huge start in removing the silos that currently exist between sales and marketing.
Awesome. I totally agree. And I've not got the vantage point that you've got as a VP and having done other roles to have anything other than intuition on that. But I feel that it's almost a no-brainer. I feel like it should already happened. There must be reasons why it hasn't happened, but I can't see why it wouldn't be the best solution moving forward. And with that, Julio, I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show. The first one, who is the world's greatest salesperson?
Ooh, that's an amazing question. Well, let me get contextual about that, and give you all an example of somebody who's doing it today. And this has no political meaning to it whatsoever, but I'm going to say Donald Trump. I mean, look at this guy. He is killing it right now in the United States with his, political campaign. And why he's doing so well is because he understands the issues of his base and he speaks to those issues. And that's a salesperson right there. Understanding your buyer, finding things that really make them push off the status quo, get them excited, to buy. He's selling his own name brand, but what I'm talking about is selling any product out there. If you understand your buyers, you understand what drives them and what motivates them, then all of a sudden that sales pitch becomes a lot easier.
So you're closer to the action over in Canada than what I am in the UK. But it is crazy watching. I'm finding it super interesting because he's a great salesperson, great negotiator, as you can see in the debates. So I've only really watched the highlights of the debates rather than the whole thing. But he seems, and I don't care. I've got no political influences on what happens in the States, even less over here in the UK. But he seems that he's kind of got slightly racist views, slightly racy views on lots of different topics. A lot of the time he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's not as good at hiding it as the politicians are. But then when he stood up on a stage next to a politician, he's making them look stupid, and he's pointing out that we've just been accepting of politicians. Perhaps we've been accepting of poor salespeople in the past as well, because that's the only thing that was there. And now, and I'm trying to bring it back to sales here, but now that you have people who are good at sales, adding value, that are really a consultant rather than someone who's read a book on consultative selling and is using buzzwords to try and change it. When you've got people that are really adding value, it's very difficult to compete with them. And I see that in Donald Trump. It's very difficult for any of the politicians to compete with him because they're all career politicians and they've not really done much. As I said, from very mild out, because I know I'm going to get a load of emails about this now, trying to change my mind. But he's built businesses, he's hired people, he's probably done some weird, naughty things as well, shady things, or people have alluded to that. But he's actually done stuff, whereas a lot of the politicians have been career politicians and not really done anything out of that. So his context is showing everyone up for what they're up to as well. I found it fascinating. And you're not the first person to bring up Donald Trump, but the insights I'm gaining now, the more people talk about him, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was an industry ripe for disruption. Think about it in a product sense, right? And what you said is exactly bang on. I mean, it was a category of people who were just career politicians who never did anything, never really made anything happen. Now somebody can come in, and it's like having a competitive product suite that, is completely not up with modern times, and you're able to, pick apart what their flaws are very easily. And I think he's done that.
Brilliant. Okay, next question. Julio, what motivates you personally to close deals?
Well, to me, I mean, it's about helping, and sales has always been about helping. And I think all good salespeople need, and this is my opinion only, but I think that thinking about it in terms of what is best for my customer versus what is best for me. Everybody struggles with that. Hey, do I hit quota? I need to hit quota, and that's very important for everybody. But ultimately, that has to be balanced out with making sure that you are going to provide success to your customer. And one of the metrics that I actually give myself is how many people can I get promoted? And by getting that metrics, wrapped around my head, what I'm always doing is looking at how can I help this person move up the ladder? How can I give them the best product mix, not only to get money in my pocket, but to provide them with a career opportunity? And that's when I find that you can build relationships extraordinarily well with people. And I think that having that sort of dual approach to the process along with one of your buyers or a team of buyers, it really puts you on the same team, and it's not selling, it's actually going down a pathway together. And I think for me, that's what motivates me to sell. I love seeing people do well. I love seeing success as a person with a teaching background, as well as always being a point guard in basketball or a midfielder in soccer or football, as you would say. That's been my passion.
It's called football. We say that because that's what it's
legitimate.
called.
Totally. Hey,
well, let's go slightly deeper than that, though, Julio. So, of course, everyone likes helping people. Seeing success when you make people successful, that's warms your heart. But why is that? Why is that important in your life? If you're saying that that's more important than the financial gain from it.
Yeah, because what I'm referring to is I'm flipping the funnel from the standard sales process. Mine does not look like an upside down triangle anymore. Mine looks more like a trumpet, where at the bottom it comes out, because I want more effort put in towards the end of the process as well. Because what I'm looking for is long-term buyers, not somebody who's going to jump in, use my product, and leave.
And why is that? Is that because it's, and I'm trying to just dig deeper here slightly, and I'm started asking this question more recently, and I'm intrigued to the answers that people are giving. Is that because simply putting in the effort up front makes your life easier in the long term? Is it that you put that effort up front and you know you're going to get more business, more commission, and more money out the far end? Because that's the
Hmm.
perhaps real
Yeah.
reason underneath all the other stuff as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's a long-term mindset thinking that, hey, I could just get in here and do transactional deals all day long and get people in, and then I'm probably going to lose them to attrition at the end of the cycle because I gave them something that might not necessarily be best for them, but hey, it made me some dollars today. Versus, you know what, let's really do a good job at making sure that this person's goals are understood and that we're adhering to them and they get the right product and service out of it. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be a 3 year to 5 year deal versus a 1 year deal where attrition is possible. And ultimately, that's exactly what we're doing it for.
Good stuff. Okay, final one from me. So I know you're VP of marketing at the moment, but you will have an answer for this, I'm sure. I ask everyone that comes on the show, if you could go back in time, speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at sales?
Jeez, I got about 25 of those. I mean, for me, it would be understanding people better. I think when I was younger, I didn't really understand the value out of understanding somebody's goals and motivations. I was just kind of understanding what their KPIs are. How can I get this product in? What do you need today? But really understanding what somebody wants to do with their life, with their career, within the company that they're in can really help you in a pitch, in a sales pitch. There's that. And then I would say that my first, going back a few years, I didn't really use content strategically. I would have used content much more strategically. And what I mean by that is if I could go back 5 years and just have a spreadsheet in front of me with every piece of content that I was going to share and me tag each and every one of those to what buyer it was for, what part of the process it was for, I would have been sharing content that ultimately was moving people down the funnel. Whereas I don't know, lost 5,000 hours of my life, like sharing content that was meaningless. Now I want to be much more strategic and much more pointed with the content I share. And I think those two things would have made me a hell of a better salesperson.
Amazing stuff. I think we could do a whole show, and I will look into this actually, bring on some guests to talk about it, of how to discover without just overtly asking, because that's not appropriate in a lot of situations, but how to find your prospects' goals both in work and out of work, because I imagine a lot of time they don't even realize what they are. So if you can uncover them, you're immediately adding value without, and I guess there must be a way of doing it without trying to be Tony Robbins and self-help them, but there must be a way of going about it that's appropriate and useful. So yeah, we'll dive into that in the future, I think, on the show. And with that, I want you to tell us a little bit about R Factor, and I want you to tell us a little bit about where the audience can find out more about you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So R Factor, been there for about a year and a half now, and it's been a game changer for me because, of course, social selling, as we both said, we don't particularly love the term, but hey, it's here. And to me, when I was looking at places that I wanted to be, and I think everybody needs to do something they love. If you wake up each and every day and you're not passionate about what you do, then it's going to be a really long day and a really long week, and those weekends will go by very, very quickly. So for me, finding an organization that really understands social selling, how to take a team, regardless of skill set, whether you just started on social or whether you've been doing it for years, putting in a process, system, and training that helps people do it the right way for them. And for me, that has been super motivational to be able to help sales teams because I've always wanted to do it and haven't had the tools and the capacity to do it. So R Factor is a platform that provides marketers the opportunity to syndicate content out to their salespeople so that their salespeople can get the right content at the right time to share with the right people over social media. And of course, it tracks it all back to your CRM system so that it takes all of the guesswork out of how social is performing. Is there revenue coming for it? Should we reinvest in it? Should we roll this out at a larger scale? So that's essentially what R Factor does, is help sales and marketing teams align, come together, and do social selling properly. So outside of that, where you can find me, of course, I am on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/social selling, and also on Twitter at Julio Visco, JULIOVISKO. And, very easy to find online, Will.
Amazing stuff. We'll link to all of that in the show notes over at salesman.red. And with that, Julio, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Hey, thank you very much. I hope to be back, man. I had a blast, Will.
And there we have it. Julio, thank you for coming on the show. I'm sure you'll come back on in the near future because there's just so much more to go at here and to dive into. So I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you guys for listening. Sales Nation, as always. And with that, I'll speak with you again tomorrow.